I must protect society.
Hello, Moses.
How are you? Hope you're fine. It is the Shy Yeti Show.
Okay, where you go?
Why have I got horns?
Oh no.
Oh, it's the Shy Life Podcast.
Oh, there's going to be some drama ahead.
All I wanted was a pie.
And then I hatched out as an egg. Okay, bring the mic over. He's ready to record.
Is it metaphorical? Is it deep?
Your show's getting so international.
Good boy. He's had all that shy is right.
Such a winner.
Blimey, Governor. It's the Shy Life Podcast.
Oh my goodness.
Hello, Paul.
I dare you having done it.
Excellent.
700.
762.
762.
Bonjour et bienvenue au podcast The Shy Life.
Hello.
Hello and welcome to yet another episode of the Shy Life Podcast with me, Paul the Shy Yeti. How are you doing? Oh, I'm alright. So, what's this episode going to be about? Well, we're going to be grumbling a lot this episode. Yes. You may know this from listening to previous episodes, but I sort of have a partner in grumbling crime in Martin Holmes. And over the last year or two, we've been recording quite a lot of grumbling. Now, a lot of this has been done for extra material, but we have such a large amount of it, though, that I thought that I should get on and use some of it. And this episode, we're going to be grumbling the whole way through. Well, pretty much the whole way through. We do have a little bit of something else somewhere in the middle, but anyway. So let's get started, let's get going, and we'll run the theme music. And when we come back, Martin Holmes will be here, and we'll be having a good old grumble. Yes. Run that theme music.
Darling, it's the Shy Life Podcast.
My favorite person is here.
Keep it rolling. Keep it rolling.
Yes, but it's a positive thing, then. The High Life, the Shy Life.
I'll go anywhere from the paper.
Hello, Captains. How are you? Go Shy Yeti.
Oh my, have you ever heard of my secret? Yes, you have.
I love the Yeti test. It's my favorite thing.
If you thought that was bad, just listen to this.
Yeah, I am strangely drawn to Yeti Uncle John's ankles as well.
I could eat my body weight in crisps.
Has anyone seen my hot sausage?
It's all gooey and meaty and yum.
It was enormous.
I don't think I'm ready to speak about it.
Here comes the grizzly.
It's the Shy Life Podcast.
It's all wait, let's begin.
I'm just thinking alien.
I like that.
Hi there. Marvelous, Paul.
Oh, chicken bag, no nothing,
Martin.
Hello.
Martin, how are you? How are you doing?
I'm well, thank you. Yes. I think your mic cut out then. I was kind of, hey, yes, that's me. I heard my own name bellowed at me. Right, yes. So it's either my problem or your problem. We'll see if we can stagger through connections.
Yeah, well, I was hoping we'd have a grumble anyway, so we can always grumble about the quality of the internet reception at my parents' house. But there we go. I have bought. This is a grumble. I've got my familiar book with me to suggest this topics, but I have a grumble of my own. Well, so I have problems sometimes with the internet here. Listeners don't really need to know this, but we have been recording for your show, Vision on Sound, just before this, and we haven't really had that many issues. And the internet seems to be better than it was a couple of months ago. But a couple of months ago, I was talking to my brother, and I thought I might get one of those boosters, because my parents' house isn't like a mansion, but it's.
No.
I mean, sometimes the internet, especially with Wi-Fi, may not quite be getting to this room as well as it is to theirs. I mean, I've been to a few hotels which have advertised that they, we've got internet in every room, and then you get to a room which is at the far side of the hotel and there's like no internet. And so I bought one of those boosters for the internet. And when I got here last time, there was the little box with the booster in, and I started to read the instructions, and my brain just went, I don't. You have to do what? And I've got to take it near the. Oh no, I can't. No, not. Oh look, the internet's working fine. So I never used it the first time.
See, I'm of the generation. It's funny actually. People learn things in different ways. I used to work with somebody who was very keen to teach himself software and stuff like that. And I always, if he handed me the book, I'd just go, I don't get this. If someone showed me how it worked, I was fine. So I've always preferred to have someone just show me what. Oh, that's what it means, and that one, and doing things that way. But if there's no one else around, I mean, one of the slight disadvantages of not having children, I think, is that you haven't got young people to show you how to set the video, as it were. It is kind of weird sometimes. It's and it's funny enough that quite a lot of people now. It comes down to YouTube videos, but of course you can't get the YouTube videos if your Wi-Fi is it's bad. It's a total catch-22 situation.
So I came back to my parents this time, and my mum said, "Oh, have you done the booster?" And I'm like,
"Charge the boosters."
Internet seems fine this time. I'll wait for another time. I just wish my brother would come and visit more often. If my brother would come and visit more often, I could have just waited until he'd come and said we need to sort it out. But he comes about once a year, so I might have to wait until that.
Sometimes that's the thing, isn't it? Sometimes just having another point of view to say, oh, well, perhaps if you try this, or perhaps if you try that. I think, the modern technical world is. I'm starting to feel my great age, Paul. Quite frankly, and I'm starting to think that maybe the world and me aren't as good a fit as we used to be.
One of the things I thought we could discuss, but it depends on how much you've travelled. Well, I guess it's seats on airplanes. Do you have any experiences of travelling on planes?
I haven't flown actually quite a long time. We haven't flown since before COVID was the last time we.
No, I'm about the same. 2019 for me. Yeah.
And we were never that well off. We had maybe one major holiday every couple of years, and quite often most of our holidays are spent in the UK, which means we don't really need to fly. But I was quite fond of going to the States before the days of Trump, really. Yeah. It's actually 10 years since I went to San Francisco.
Yeah.
And we sort of got flying to America more or less sorted. We realized that the best hubs to go through were not necessarily Chicago, New York. It was maybe go through Boston or go through Atlanta, because they were quieter, although our experiences at Atlanta were interesting, shall we say. But yes, the last time we went, we did actually get a direct flight back from San Francisco to Manchester, which was brilliant, 10-hour flight. I think it was, or did we come back to London? I can't remember. Anyway, it was we got on a Virgin 747. It was the first time I'd ever been on a 747, and in the movies in the 70s, the 747 is this massive, huge aeroplane. It's got loads of leg room and everything like that. Well, the ones that Virgin were flying towards the end of their days, bless them, were the economy section, because I've always flown economy, because, again, I'm not the jet-setting superstar that people might think I am. No. Oh, God, 10 hours in that seat. Now, the worst thing about that flight, there were two terrible things about that flight. The first thing was the person who sat down and immediately put his seat back. And basically I spent 10 hours with this guy's seat about 2 inches from my teeth. So my nose was over the back of his seat for the entire flight, because I don't put the seat.
Do you know what I used to do with people like that? When I thought, I could see they're about put their seat back, I would stick my both arms, the chair, and they'd be like, doesn't seem to be working. So I couldn't see that I was sitting behind it with my hand, because I'm thinking, no, you are not putting your chair back. I need enough space as it is, being a larger gentleman. So I just do it until they gave up. But I mean, I don't even know why do they allow seats to recline like that? Because it inconveniences. I'm not going to be the delete
the person who does it to the person behind you. It's like a dog.
I'm not going to do that. Yeah, I'm not going to do that to them. Yeah, it's bizarre that I can understand on something like, if you're in first class, but then you don't have someone sitting behind you. Probably you have a little
somebody does it, and they just assume that you behind presumably will do the same thing. And I do, because and again, you can imagine. I can't actually imagine why there aren't more rows.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is that even when the steward comes along, they don't seem to tell them how. Yeah. They don't, even when they say, right, you need to put your seats in the upright position, sometimes people still don't do that. It absolutely vexes me. Of course, the thing about that is that the second awful thing about that flight was that this caused they gave me a glass of fruit juice at some point with one of the meals, but this person juggling their seat basically meant that I got covered in orange juice, and the seat got covered. I imagine if someone got on the plane after me, they must have thought I'd wet myself because the entire seat was damp and orange juicy, and I was damp and orange juicy. And I went off, and I went off to the toilets to try and clean myself up a bit and dry off a bit and try and use the dryers and things, which they don't have on aeroplanes, I found out. But and of course then somebody thought, I don't know, somebody tried to chat me up, Paul. This has never happened. A bloke actually tried to chat me up on an aeroplane, which completely and utterly threw me, because literally in my life I am not a person people have ever chatted up of either sex or any sex. They've just not. They are not a person that people look at and think, tasty. So it was obviously very dark on this plane, and I was obviously smelling of orange juice. So maybe
they were really into oranges. Something like that happened to me with a drink where I was at the cinema and I had one of those massive like Cokes or something. I mean, between you and me, sometimes I would sneak a drink in rather than pay exorbitant prices anyway. But I think on this occasion I did have a big drink, and the person that I was with hadn't bought a drink, and I wasn't in a couple with them, so they couldn't expect that they would necessarily be sharing it with me, but they kind of whispered to me, "Oh, can I just have a little bit of your drink?" And I said yes, and gave them the drink. And then when I took it back and I took a drink, I realised that they hadn't used the straw. They'd opened the lid, taken the drink, and hadn't put the lid back on properly. So I take a swig and get half of it down my top, and so I'm sitting there with ice cubes on me. And so
there's a definite drink etiquette in again. That flight, I look back on it, it was horrific. I mean, Pip wasn't well either on the flight, but it's just 10 hours in a seat that was basically, a battery chicken would have found difficult, with this seat front right up to my face, and for 8 hours feeling a bit damp and smelling of orange juice. I tell you, it was not my finest 10 hours.
I did go for a period of going to America. I had a friend in LA, and also when I must have visited him about 4 times in about 2 years, and we kind of did return visits. He came to London because he liked London, and I got to see Portland as well because his family was in Portland, and that was the furthest most holidays I've had. I've gone with friends, whereas this was a holiday to meet somebody. So it was one of the few times I've travelled where I had to get myself there. I had to be paying attention, because if I missed my flight, then it was only me I had to blame. And one of the times I had to go, I don't know whether I got a bit of a chill in the hotel, because some of these hotel rooms, I got a hotel room near the airport before I was leaving, and it was quite
the aircon is on.
Yeah. And I don't know whether I didn't get a bit of a chill, and then sort of felt lousy for the first for the actual travelling, and maybe the day or two afterwards. But
there is something weird about the States. I mean, you know, this connecting flights, I don't actually understand. I mean, obviously you do the international bit, and that's actually usually okay. It's not great. It's usually okay. And you land and you do all the trying to find your luggage and identify it and put it onto the connecting flight so they can send it to Denver, even though you're not going anywhere near Denver yourself. And that is a whole different ball game, and your luggage, and having to wait up when you're jet lagged because the airport's got to deliver your luggage 6 hours later because it missed its flight, you know. But that being a whole different ball game, I can have total and utter culture shock when I go to America. You know, just I can even just not be able to work the light switches. It just can absolutely throw me. But the thing that gets me is connecting flights, because then once you've landed and you're still connecting, you're on a domestic flight, and domestic flights in America, like buses, are horrific.
Yeah,
because I know that they use them all the time and they're probably just used to it. But the thing is that somebody can bring pretty much the entire contents of their house onto the flight, and they'll have you're allowed your tiny little bag from your international travel, and you're parked next to somebody who basically surrounds themselves with, you know, sometimes, you know, pet dog and and like 6 suitcases and then the kitchen sink and 14 hats, and oh my god, and these things are rammed to the gills, and there's no food, or there is food and they'll sell it, but you can only buy food, and because you can't take the food you bought in the airport onto the plane with you. But you can buy food on the plane, but they run out about 6 rows into the thing because they don't assume everybody on the flight wants it, and so you're sitting there starving, waiting for it, thinking, oh, at least I'll get one of their snack boxes or something, and they've run out.
I think I went on one of those once, and they showed the film The Perfect Storm. It's the last thing you want to watch. I mean, I know it's not about airplanes, but it's still about bad weather. And,
well, I mean, it's actually a quite vertiginous film. It can make you feel a bit seasick just looking at it. Yeah.
When my friend Nick and I went to Vegas in 2000, we flew to Cincinnati, and then we had to get a internal flight, and it's the only time I've been on a plane where it was like being on a bus.
And then I think it came down in 2 or 3 other cities on the way over to Vegas.
Oh my god!
And we were sort of going through time zones, and we were just completely disorganized. I think it was a relatively cheap flight, and it was also we were going to be witnesses at a wedding.
Oh, right.
So we had no choice when we were going. So it was all booked, and then the couple split up, and it never happened. But we still had our tickets, so we thought, well, we're going to go.
We'll go anyway. Yeah,
we're going to go to Vegas, and it was pretty cheap, but it did mean we were in these sort of internal flight, and it was just before Thanksgiving. So everybody getting on the plane, it was the last dash before Thanksgiving, and we were just totally disorientated because we'd completely lost track of how many time zones we'd passed from Cincinnati to Vegas, and that was pretty rough.
Kind of weird things. One of mine slight horrors. The last time I actually got on a plane was self-check-in. We had to do a self-check-in because we'd gone on a package holiday, and that was chaos. You know, you had to have things printed, but you also had to do your own tags for suitcase, all sorts of horrific things. But one time, when I thought self-check-in might have been beneficial, was we were coming through Boston and flying home. And weirdly, we were in this long queue. And somebody I knew from work, not someone I actually worked with, but someone who worked for one of our suppliers, was in the same queue. So as we were in this snake, about every 20 minutes, we would pass each other. Hello again, you know. But the thing about it is that it was one of those things where, for some reason, the queue just got longer and longer and longer. I think they understaff check-ins at certain airports, and America, maybe to save money, they have fewer, and they had 6 members of staff to do all the check-ins for all the flights, and that was fine, you know, that was working until somebody had a problem, and this one couple had a problem, and it was the kind of problem where all 6 members of staff got sort of sucked into it, so that for about 40 minutes nobody was getting checked in because these people were talking, you know how it goes sometimes. And the fascinating thing was that we got to the point where there was our flight was due to leave, but there was a flight for London that was due to leave 10 minutes before ours. And they actually started saying, is there anybody in this queue who's supposed to be on the London flight? And people going, yeah, me. And they were behind me, you know. And they were just literally hauling them out of the queue and running them down the airport. And you just think this could be solved by having more staff. And there always seems to be this thing where there's not enough staff. I mean, we were at another airport, I think this was the Atlanta problem, where the TSA people, you know, the people who, you go to America and they really treat you like you're obviously some sort of terrorist. You're obviously, until they've proved you. And then suddenly it's have a nice day. But until they've done that, they treat everybody like they're some kind of monster. And we were in this thing on a Saturday afternoon where 6 wide-body jets landed at exactly the same time, more or less. And so we were in a half-mile queue, and there was one TSA officer on duty, and Philippa went first, and we were trying to go through together, but no, you have to go back beyond the line, sir. So Philippa was being processed, and he fell asleep. The TSA guard fell asleep at the desk. He'd done such a long shift. So you've got a half-mile queue, one person who's asleep. And then he got up and went and had a break. And there's like all these people standing there going, well, what do we do? We've got connecting, you know, tell you, nightmare. You know, you actually start to think, I'll stay at home, mate. I'll just stay at home.
That's what puts me off, because my mobility hasn't been so good of late. And I think, I wonder if I can. I'm worried about standing in queues where, or getting stuck in queues. I remember that time I was ill, going over to LA. I remember that being one where once I got the other side, the queue couldn't have been longer, and I was feeling lousy and just wanted to meet my friend and get back to his place. And but it was so slow, and they kind of want you to be all perky and answering questions, and they wonder why perhaps you're not feeling that great.
It's a very odd, peculiar thing, actually. I think perhaps sometimes you do better by being ill, because they at least put you in a wheelchair and push you through process.
Yeah. Well, actually, when I was recently showing my friend Matthias around London, we went to the Natural History Museum, and actually it helped because he'd been smoking like a vape. And they were like, oh, sir, you can't smoke the vape. He wasn't inside, but he was inside their gates, outside. And they were like, oh, you can't smoke that. And he apologized. And then they saw that I was there with my stick, and they were like, do you think, are you going to be okay with the queue? And I was like, well, you know. And they were like, oh, don't worry, go through to the front of the queue. And I'm like, well, so Matthias has joked with me now that he'll take his vape everywhere, just in case because he hadn't noticed that I had a stick until he was breaking their rule, which he didn't know he was breaking.
But then again, you see, this is the other thing. I mean, nowadays I find that when you arrive back in Britain, the immigration people are just as surly than, you know, they really treat you like you're some kind of, you know, there's something wrong with you. And yet, you know, and the happiest place I've ever tried to get into was Oslo, and we just breezed through Oslo, and it was just the loveliest airport in the world. I've been to Oslo. Yeah,
I've been to Oslo, but I can't remember. I can remember. Weird thing is, I can remember that I was listening to the new Girls Aloud album on the bus on the way from the airport. My brain has retained that. Yeah. But it hasn't retained anything about the airport, I'm afraid. But,
well, no, it's one of those things. Maybe it's not memorable because nothing went wrong. I just think it's
weird. It's weird how why does my brain? It's weird when brains remember things that there's no real reason to remember at all in any shape or form. But
anyway, we've whinged for 20 minutes just about that.
before we go on, we have to be a little bit careful because, well, let me explain. So I thought we could talk about creepy crawlies or whether we like them, don't like them. Or the only thing is, one of our listeners is a dedicated follower of fashion, a dedicated spider keeper. So I'm always very careful that we don't say anything anti-spider. At least, I mean, we can say we may have had previously bad experiences with them, but we mustn't talk about doing anything horrible to them because that would be
8 legs.
We have we have the actual.
I can't do that tonal register.
Gentleman. Oh no, it's not a gentleman. The spider in question has actually been on the show. So we love you. We love you, spiders. But we may be saying some not particularly happy things about spiders. The spiders back when we were children were different. They were nasty. Oh, they were rude. Anyway, with that little explanation, what is your can you stand them? Do you like them? Not necessarily spiders. Other thing, worms, anything like that.
I've known people who have phobias. I don't have a spider phobia myself, but I know that there are people who. I used to work with someone who was always complaining that her husband wouldn't. He would just have a proper screaming abdabs if he saw a spider. And so she was the one who had to sort of collect them and dispense them. Our house is at the moment very full of spiders. Not because we have any kind of pet thing going on. We seem to have a lot of them at the moment, and so we are quite often sort of gathering them and. Shall we say, well, they go out the window. I mean, I know that might not be the nicest way to treat them, but we do have a lot of that. I can't believe how big some of them get. I mean, we're not in Australia territory here. No. It's not like, they've got those things that look like somebody's got a, Itsy and Bitsy, they've got an actual glove on. I mean, they're not that big, but there are some big house spiders in this place, very long-legged things. Yes, they are. Yeah. They are everywhere. We have a lot of cobwebs. Again, I'm telling you far too much about our obviously lack of housekeeping, really. But yeah, we do have a lot of spiders' webs, and we do have a lot of spiders in this house. It's true.
I used to. I remember I've had moments with spiders where I've been kind of nervous of them. But I think the ones that are more spindly, I've definitely. Kind of like, okay, I don't mind picking them up and putting them outside.
Years ago, I was visiting a friend and we were sharing a hotel room, and there was this massive spider in the room, and we were like...
Men in their 30s or whatever, and we were like, oh, but you deal with it, I'll do it. And anyway, we in the end, we managed to get it onto the saucer of a teacup, and then put the cup over the top of it, and then... it always tickled me that I took it from our end of the hotel to the other end of the hotel and let it free, and it ran under somebody else's door, and then I went back to my room. So,
but I don't know. It's funny. One of the funniest the genuinely hilarious things that happened when I was a student was the lads who were watching a football game, I think, and when what they called the flying house brick flew through the window, and suddenly you had a load of sort of proper football watching lads suddenly trying to panic and trying to get cricket bats and all sorts of things. It was really again the way they described it at the time. I just remember that being one of those high points. Maybe we'd had a couple. I don't know, but no, creepy crawlies generally I do struggle with. I'm not. I don't mind snails particularly. But I don't like slugs. The idea of picking up slugs makes me quite,
A slug. I still remember. They can be so different in different areas as well. Yeah. I remember even as a child, my cat coming in, and I was drawing with crayons and things, and I picked up this crayon, and it wasn't a crayon; it was a little slug and it was only a little one, and that was bad enough. But then I remember going and staying. My mum, I think this must be a very early 80s because it's before my brother was alive. We went and stayed at my grand's house in a caravan, her bungalow backed on to a big wood, and I don't know if it had been raining, but the slugs that were around were giant black ones, and I was probably only about 7 or 8, and I still remember them to this day. Yeah, so I'm not keen on slugs.
It is funny though, because people do seem to have a different thing. We have a slight problem that for some reason one of our double glazing units is now filling up slowly with dead ladybirds. They seem to have found a way to get into it, and then they don't seem to be able to get out, and then they die. And so, and of course, you can't get into the unit yourself. So we just have a sort of there's a few of them, and you just think, well, how on earth are we going to get rid of those? But people like ladybirds because they're pretty, and they have good press agent, I think. Whereas some of the other, we also, because again, I'm telling you far too much about we have a silverfish issue. And silverfish are not something that please me, maybe because they make me think of Cybermen and Cybermats and things, but they scuttle about, and I'm never very fond of them. But you see, I actually think the spider is actually something I'm quite content to have in the house. In the same way, we have the woodlice as well. Again, this probably tells you terrible things about where we live, but it's an old house, And they, but I think the spiders, because they do, they spin the webs, and that means that the flies get caught. They, and I think some of these other creepy crawlies actually get consumed by the spiders. So I'm not averse to spiders. If one is in a particularly alarming, might crawl into my head while I'm in the toilet or in the bath kind of way, I will put them in an old soup jar, a pot, and chuck them out the window. But and I know that they're not supposed to be outside because the birds get them immediately. But I kind of think, well, birds doing what birds do, spiders do what spiders do, and there we are. And yeah, I don't know, creepy crawlies. They're just they do. It depends on the creepy crawl. If something like praying mantis landed in front of me, I would be Yeah. Did you remember what's the the second Indiana Jones film they made? The prequel, The Temple of Doom, and that sequence with all the insects where he puts to put his arm in to release the hole in the wall, and it's just absolutely full of all sorts of strange and peculiar creepy crawlies. That was not my idea of a good time, really, when I first saw that in the cinema. I remember feeling quite on edge when I saw that. So.
I was watching an Instagram channel today, which I don't know how I came across, but there was a big yellow kimono dragon. I'm not sure if it is a kimono dragon, but it was wearing a little bow tie and a hat, and it was being presented with some really luridly coloured bugs. I don't know what they were going to turn into, but
and he just went and just sort of scoffed them all up, and I was kind of a bit sort of
slightly traumatized because I was kind of thinking, what on earth are those bugs that he's eating? And actually he's eating them alive in front of me on Instagram. And I wasn't sure what to think about that. But he did have a very nice bow tie, and I guess I'm supposed to be on his side. But I was a bit worried about the bugs too, but because it's too late now. But
nature raw in tooth and claw. The funny thing is, it's not funny at all, but there are some terrible things you see on these nature programs about parasites eating things from the inside. A lot of the stuff that was done in Alien is based on the life cycle of some of these creatures. But I suppose you have to try not to anthropomorphize them. You really have to try and make out that they are not human reactions. When something gets hoovered up by the bigger thing, I don't imagine it sits there going, oh, I'm never going to cure cancer now. It doesn't have that kind of thought process. But even so, it's still quite traumatic to see.
I still remember my this is going back to what you were saying about woodlice. I don't know. Do we know? Is there a hierarchy, or do we know how can various people write in with little sort of supporting different sides, so we know? But ants versus woodlice. Are they morally, ethically, is one better than the other? If you were going to help one or the other, which is because I made a decision, and I might have been supporting the baddie for all I know. Anyway, there was a woodlouse. I think I did it because the woodlouse was one little woodlouse, and there were lots of ants, and they were trying to attack the woodlouse. And I just went around this was when I was a child. I must say this was yesterday. But I do the same thing. I kept stomping on all the ants that were.
Right.
So I killed many to save one. I just hope that was a nice woodlouse. I hope woodlice are more useful than ants. I'm not sure.
Well, a lot of the things in where we live is, I mean, because we are quite rural in many ways, is we won't use chemical sprays, anti pesticides or whatever. That we're not fans of pesticides. So a lot of or herbicides or weed killer. So on one level, that's because we watched Planet of Giants, when we were children or whatever. But I think it's more to do with this idea that because we like bees. You see, this is the thing. We're very fond of the bees, not so fond of wasps, but bees. Live and let live. And of course, if you put any of these things out, well, the bees will be harmed by them as much as the thing you actually want to get rid of, I think. So it is kind of difficult to make those choices, because I mean, a lot of people put ant powder down and things, but then they say, oh, well, you shouldn't put ant powder down because cats might eat it. You've got to be a little bit. If that's the choice you make not to use these things, then you've got to live with the consequences. And one of the consequences, unfortunately, is the creepy crawly. I'm never hugely fond of the worm, but I know that the worm does the soil a lot of good. So we kind of,
I wouldn't want to be in a bath with them.
Yes, that's the thing. Everything in its place, really. And I think that's really what you have to that's the conclusion you have to come down to. There's nothing wrong with a worm doing what a worm does, but I'd rather it wasn't sort of climbing out of the bath plug, while I was in the shower.
I tell you what, my biggest fear as a child was, of all the creepy crawlies, the one that I didn't, other than the slugs, which were pretty bad, what I didn't like was the daddy long legs, because you've got, it looks like a spider, but it can also fly.
Yes.
They used to scare me because they're kind of like.
I think anything that basically bites you, I mean, there's, I'm really, when we go away, I mean, mosquitoes are particularly, I don't respond well to the mosquito. And, it can, again, it's one of those strange and peculiar things, because with climate change, you actually think that things that we associate with foreign parts, as it were, are going to start becoming things that we have to deal with here. And, I don't really want that. I don't really want to have to deal with mozzies. I mean, they're not pleasant, and there are all sorts of creepy crawlies that, you see, one of the things about the British winter is it used to be so cold that most of these things got rid of. But now I find that they seem to be surviving in greater numbers because of, that thing that people like to deny called climate change. And I think, the fact that the British weather, the British environment is getting warmer is actually meaning that these things are becoming more well, they're surviving. They're more profligate. There are a lot more of them about, and yet we see the other thing is I'm a bird watcher. I go to RSPB sites and you see not dandelions. What are they not? What are they called? Dragonflies. That's it. Dragonflies and their equivalents, and they are beautiful. They are beautiful things.
They are beautiful, but they can sometimes. I remember walking through a field where there were some dragonflies, and they were really like flying. I couldn't actually see where the water was that they were, but they were flying quite close, and they were zipping by. And I just thought, how they
could sense the salt ball.
Well, how like when you're on maybe you're on a bike. Well, even if you're not on a bike, but you get a fly in your eye. And I just definitely didn't want a dragonfly stuck in my eye because they're pretty big, and I guess they wouldn't be nice if you kind of got them.
No,
they wouldn't like it. You wouldn't like it, but
they also are part of the food chain, and that's the thing. I mean, the birds will eat the dragonflies, and so on and so forth. The dragonflies eat other, smaller bugs and all this kind of thing.
Equally so, I don't want to eat the dragonfly by mistake.
No.
So that's
the thing, isn't it? That's one of those things that's sort of happening now. Is that insects as food? It's becoming one of those food alternatives that people are talking about, and that again is one of those things. If someone sort of served you up a plate of beetles, I'm not really quite sure how I'd feel about that.
Yes, I have one more subject that I want to discuss, and I thought, what would you say about practical jokers?
Oh, don't.
I guess I'm kind of thinking of the ones you encounter when you're at school, because they're usually the worst ones. But I used to have a friend who I used to do my filming with in the 90s, and he was a bit of a practical joker. So much so that I think it sort of ended our friendship in a way. Not well. Let me explain. Back in when the Gulf War was on.
The Gulf War was caused by a practical joke.
No, but there was a practical joke letter going around, which people sent one another, saying that you'd been conscripted to join the army. And I got a letter saying that I'd been conscripted to join the army, and I don't know how long it took me to realise it was a practical joke, but it was my practical jokey friend who'd sent the letter. But he was so used. But I don't like practical jokes. I like jokes maybe, but I wouldn't play. I've been involved where friends have played practical jokes and other people.
Back in the day when we used to have I had a lot of pen pals. One of my friends I knew used to like writing false pen friends, inventing characters, and just for the fun of it, and then maybe would use their grand's address. So there was no, and I became party to the knowledge that there was a fake pen friend going around, and the friend who was being played the joke on said, "I'm going to go down to Bristol and meet up with. I'm going to, I know where she works. I'm going to go and pop down and surprise her." And I'm thinking that she doesn't exist. She's a he, and she doesn't even exist. I was trying not to get involved,
but in the end, I had to be the one who kind of said, "Oh, Sarah called. She's moving to Swindon, or she's moving to Manchester. She won't be there." And don't you dare do this again.
And it's all your fault for being the bearer of bad news, isn't it? That's
and also sort of being caught up in it when you didn't want to be. But the friend who sent me the letter about the Gulf, about being conscripted, was always thinking that other people were playing practical jokes on, or would do. I don't know who the practical joker was in this case, but my pranky friend got pranked by somebody, and I got the blame for it. And I said, I know I owe you one for having pranked me, but I don't like practical jokes, and and if you think it's me, it isn't me. So I look elsewhere, please. And,
I don't know. I am of the opinion that some of the worst crimes in history have been in the name of a good laugh, or been done in the name of a good laugh. And I think these people who say, "Oh, yeah," it's funny actually. I used to know somebody who used to say terrible things to people, and you would sort of say, you would start to say, "Oh, that's not really acceptable," and they go, "Only joking," as if that forgave it all. And I just thought, really, no, that's not pleasant. No, but the practical joker is just tedious. I had a terrible experience at work once where somebody, and because I have no sense of humour when it comes to these things. I had a right strong, and I ended up embarrassing myself because I just stormed out of the office. I was so furious, it was somebody. They didn't realise that I had absolutely no tolerance of practical jokes, and probably thought it was hilarious. They probably still do on some level. They probably still talk about it to this day if they even remember I existed. That how they managed to prank me that day, and I think I hate that. I hate it all, absolutely.
I always used to hate it because I like to consider myself a very silly person, or I do silly things, but I know
it's humiliating somebody else, and I don't like.
Well, that's always bad. People. But I never liked it. In my free time, I'd like be mucking around doing silly videos or whatever. Nothing much has changed. I still do that now. But what I hated was the people mucking around in class so that the whole class got detention. I never really. Luckily, it never really happened to me, but I was always in fear that it would. And also, I had to get a bus home. I didn't live in Salisbury, so I wanted, basically, when the school ended, I wanted to be shooting down the road because the first bus home would be in about 10 minutes after the end of school. So I didn't tend to hang around that long, and I just couldn't stand people mucking around in class. We just want to get in there, do what we got to do, and then get out again. I don't want to be.
Oh yes, I do have one injustice that still grates because of mucking about that other people did, and I happened to look round at the wrong moment, and the teacher who was watching from across the playground saw me turn round, and so when he came into the room and said, "Right, I want," he said, "Well, I know you were Mecca." I thought, that's it. I literally turned my head round at the wrong moment, and I got the whole blooming blame for it. And I thought, right, yep, never again.
Yeah, I got. I don't know why she did it, but I went to a school for a couple of years where the girls left the year before the boys. Mostly when I was at the grammar school, it was an all boys school. But this school I was in, we were only there for 2 years because everyone left at 13, but the girls left at 12. And anyway, one particular girl who was always a bit sort of troublesome, she came in and for some reason she had toothpaste either on her hand or on a handkerchief, and she just smeared it over my face just as the teacher walked in. And I'd be no good on Prisoner Cell Block H because you don't tell on the. If Queen Bee beats you up, you don't say I was beaten up. But anyway, in this case, the teacher comes in and goes, "Why have you got that on your face?" And I was like, "I don't know." She's literally just walked up to me and smeared it. I was first into. I'm not gonna go. I don't know, miss. I dubbed her in straight away, and
she never forgave you.
She's never. Well, she hasn't sent her stormtroopers in to have me killed yet, so I think I've got away with it.
Well, you see, the problem with anything like this is that you think, well, maybe in the end, the balance to the universe. These people always get away with it, and I've always absolutely detested it, and I probably always will. So there we are.
There are some people you can see sort of when you meet people at a different age, like. When you in work, you think, yeah, I can see how this person was probably the class prankster back in the day. But
well, that's this way. If they can stay away from me, I'm sure. Again, I mean, there was lots of television that was based around, like Candid Camera and Game for a Laugh and stuff. And I just the whole idea of it just fills me with horror.
This sort of programs used to make me squirm because
Well, it's not even that I'm embarrassed on other people's behalf but it's just this fact that you're supposed to just go along with it and put up with it because it's all just a bit of fun, and it's not fun for you. It's not fun for me. The humiliation of other people, as far as I'm concerned, should never be fun. But then again, you see, I'm not the person. I don't do fun, Paul. I don't do fun. I've said this before, and I suspect that's just it. Maybe I am just a killjoy. Maybe I'm a party pooper. But I find all that sort of life. I sometimes feel completely disconnected from the rest of the world, and I don't really understand it. But things like that are the things that make me think, you know what? I'm quite glad sometimes that I don't understand you. I'd rather not involve myself. The problem is that is what sometimes makes people think you're a better target, which is even more worrying, really.
Hello?
Hello, Paul.
Hello, Paul.
Are you there?
Lisa Troby, how are you?
We're fine.
Oh, yeah, we're good, thank you. Happy birthday.
Yeah, happy, what is it, your 9th birthday? Well, not your 9th birthday, but the podcast.
Well, you're a bit early.
Oh.
It's not for a few weeks, but still, no, it's fine. Still fine.
Well, we like to get in early, don't we?
We do, yes.
It's nice. It's nice to be early.
Better early than late.
Can you believe it? 9 years nearly.
9 whole years.
Yeah, gosh.
That's longer than Sutton Park.
Good God.
Not as many episodes, although
No.
probably maybe I know. Goodness knows how many minutes it is. It could anyway.
Oh, it feels like several minutes to me.
That's quite a lot of minutes.
Yeah, quite a lot. Yeah. What whilst you're here, you got any news? Any facts for us?
I've been reading a lot of astronomy books again. So
You've been reading a lot of books.
I've been reading a lot of books just generally.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I've had in my hand a lot of Brian Cox, haven't I?
Yes.
That's always good.
Well, I've been in the bath with Cox several times, haven't I?
Yeah.
And I've been.
He got a tap end, didn't he?
Cox up the tap end. I said, get up the tap end, Cox. With your what accent had he got? Is it northern?
Northern.
He's not with your northern accent. Mm. Yeah. But yeah, he was. I was going to say writing, but I was reading. No, I was reading about planets, wasn't I? Mm-hmm. So I thought we could do some planet facts over them, going forward. So,
yeah.
So I know Ick knows his planets, but I wondered how much you actually know. I know you've been in space with me.
I've been in space, but yeah.
But
sometimes it can be quite overwhelming. It can be quite overwhelming. You don't always take it all in.
Yeah, but Venus, for example, if I said to you, "Do you fancy a trip to Venus?" You know, what would you imagine? It would be a nice place. What would you?
I've seen that episode of the Avengers, Venus with Love, and it's like a very bright light that turns everyone's hair white.
Well, that's not actually too far from the truth, because...
You mean they did some research?
Well, no, not in that it turns people's hair white. It's that Venus is a white point of light, brighter than any planet or star in the night sky. So, obviously, the sun is the brightest thing you can see, and the moon is the second brightest thing you can see. But Venus is actually the brightest sort of point source in the sky. So, I mean, it's often mistaken for like the Christmas star, because you either see it just after the sun has set or just before the sun is rising. So you can imagine, like in December, if you're seeing it low on the horizon and it's the brightest thing in the sky, people often would think it was like the Christmas star. So that's quite romantic, I suppose, because they say Venus is sort of romantic, isn't it? You know.
Well, it's named after the goddess of romance.
Yeah,
isn't
that's
it?
right.
So...
but if you actually went there, if I took you on a day out to Venus and we landed, it wouldn't be at all romantic.
It'd be hot, wouldn't it?
It would be bloody hot. You wouldn't be able to breathe. You'd be crushed by the atmosphere, which is 92 times greater than Earth's, and you'd be dissolved by the sulfuric acid.
Okay, that doesn't sound like a nice place to go for a date.
So I'm not going to invite you for a day out on Venus, Paul.
I can't remember. I don't think I've been there. I mean, if I had, presumably there was some sort of way.
You might have had a force field or something.
Yeah, something. But what I need is one of those I Spy spotter books of planets.
Yeah.
An actual tourist one, not a bit like one of those Lonely Planet guides. Not, So, I mean, if you went to Venus and all those bad things happened to you because you weren't prepared, you wouldn't even get back in time to get your money back because you wouldn't be anything left to you.
Well, although the surface of Venus is horrible, it has been suggested that if you go about 50 kilometres up into the atmosphere, the air thins out and the temperature drops, so it's not impossible to survive about 50 kilometres above Venus. So a NASA aerospace engineer suggested making floating islands that you could live on. So, like was it in Captain Scarlet? They've got that floating thing, haven't they?
They have it on in Fortnite as well.
And in Fortnite, there's a floating thing. And in what was that Doctor Who with the Master?
Which Doctor Who with the Master?
With when I was going to
might have to narrow it down a little bit.
John Sim. They got the floating helicarrier thing.
Oh, the Valiant.
Yeah, the Valiant.
Yeah.
So if you built something like that in Venus, you could float around on that in relative comfort, possibly.
The only trouble was, if you were doing that and you were building it and you needed a loo break, you couldn't nip down to Venus for a quick loo break because you'd die.
Well, no, you'd have to bring a load of sulfuric acid floating about. Yeah, so you'd need a porta potty for Venus. It would have to be wiped clean as well.
Oh.
Yes. No, I mean for the outside. Because of the sulfuric acid.
It's a lot of work for what's involved. But
yeah, so I wouldn't advise going there anytime soon. But anyway, there you go. There's Venus.
I don't think I will.
In a nutshell for you.
Although, maybe for the 10th anniversary, we'll see.
Yeah.
Is that everything about Venus? I need to get back to what I was doing.
All right. Yes. I mean, I could read you a whole book about Venus, but I'm not going to. So.
Oh well, we can do that another time.
There's not enough hours.
Well, thank you for your early birthday greetings. I better get back to the listeners and whatever we were talking about.
We'll talk to you again.
It's always good to hear you both.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, and you. Cheerio then.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
bye-bye.
Speak to you soon. Bye for now. Bye.
Bye.
What do you make of the extinction of the dinosaurs? Is it annoying you?
Well, I'm against it, or am I for it? I don't know. I think, well, obviously for the dinosaurs, it was not their finest hour, was it? Really? I mean, I imagine again we think about these things historically, but we kind of I don't imagine it was actually quite as overnight as people would have you believe. I mean, imagine, yes, obviously the ones that were underneath where the Big Bang thing happened. Yeah, I mean, they were pretty much gone in an instant, as indeed whenever that rock comes to wipe out humanity, we will, we'll go, oh, what happened to New York? But I think it will be one of those things where the rest sort of, it would have been a long, cold, slow and lonely, miserable. I feel quite sorry for the dinosaurs in that sense.
A bit like the last 14 years of Tory government.
Well, maybe not that slow.
At least they did extinct now. So.
You see, the thing that gets me about history, Joe, is that funnily enough, we only really have history that we actually understand, comprehend in the modern era. In the last since film cameras came along, really, and since audio recording came along, we can now actually listen to the words that were spoken by people. But even that, even if you think of that as the late Victorian era, we don't really know what it was like to live like that. We can guess, but actually in terms of our own lived experience, we don't really know. And the further we go back in history, the less we know. We know that the pyramids got built. We're not really sure how, and that's only 4,000 years ago. You go back 10,000 years, we were very vague. We know that some people were making beakers and some people were making tools out of, say, bronze and stuff, but we don't really know much more than that. We know the gist of what was happening. So actually, when it comes back to the dinosaurs, I like to think that the Silurians happened. I like to think that there were upright, intelligent lizard people who had a civilization, perhaps after the dinosaurs, in somewhere in those millions of years we don't really know about, which has been completely wiped out in the way that human civilization will also be wiped out one day. I think the thing that fascinates me about humanity is we're so arrogant. We think the world is always the same. And we look at our history, human history, and the maps have not moved, and yet we know that the plates move around. So I think we generally, as human beings, we just think this is it and we are the pinnacle. And I actually think we're just a blip on the way to something else. I think if you took away humanity tomorrow, maybe the thing that would last longest, apart from the plastics in the substrata, I think the thing that would last longest is probably something like the Hoover Dam. But when that cracked and collapsed, all our engineering, all our skills, all our achievements, in some ways, give or take a couple of thousand years,
all our
could
podcasts.
nothing.
All our podcasts.
Everything.
Sorry.
Yeah, there's a lovely scene in, I think it's Mad Max 3, where they find a record and some children are playing with an old manual and they manage to get sound out of an old LP, an old vinyl LP. And I always remember thinking when CDs came in, you thought, well, the chances of somebody finding something that's a laser that can play a CD in the ruins.
Yeah.
The thing about mechanical processes, LPs, vinyl, and the fact that we had wind-up gramophones, the fact that something is very analog means it's actually got more future, weirdly. I mean, I've not been a huge fan of the resurgence of vinyl. I think it's a very silly thing, but nevertheless, it's kind of you can see actually it's something low tech that you could get to work. And I think that's an interesting thing. But I do generally think that there may have been this vast civilization, just as vast as the human civilization, that got wiped out, maybe shortly after the dinosaurs, maybe before the dinosaurs, the big dinosaurs. I mean, the funny thing about the fossil record is really it's tiny. It's little tiny bits. We've got this dinosaur here and this dinosaur here. And, you kind of think there must be many more, but the way the surface of the Earth is churned up by the magma, swallowing large chunks of the surface, actually, we may never know really quite what that civilization or what that time was really like. We can make a lot of educated guesses, but I think we've even come to the point now where we're starting to think that most of the dinosaurs were possibly feathered, and yet the ones we see in Jurassic Park certainly are not feathered, or
Well, I went to the Natural History Museum a month or two ago with my friend Matthias. I hadn't been to the Natural History Museum for years, but I remember, dinosaur bones or whatever, and it being like a hushed sort of look and all that sort of thing, and we were all whispering, and when I went this time, it was like being in a playground with screaming kids everywhere, and
dinosaurs. They've made them exciting.
I maybe wish that they were extinct rather than the dinosaurs. But it kind of took the sort of hushed awe out of the whole experience. But
I think it's interesting because some people think I'm not being a parent, I'm not a fan of children. I think it's actually I'm not a big fan of parents, quite frankly. But I think it's them that annoy me more than the kids. The kids are just doing what kids do. Sometimes sometimes they shouldn't, but that's a different thing.
Yeah, it's like my
love dinosaurs. I remember. I mean, when I was very young, which I'm going to show you my great age, that a friend of mine wanted to be a paleo. I think he pronounced it as a paleontologist, which of course is not quite right, but that's what he wanted to grow up and be. I think he grew up to be a graphic designer, but that's a different story. But he wanted to be that, and I remember he had the film poster for The Land That Time Forgot. So his dad had managed to get from a cinema for him, and we were all very jealous of that because it was a great poster. But with a submarine, let's face it, I like submarine films and I like dinosaurs, and it's a film both in. But I just think the idea of dinosaurs, at least our fictionalized idea of dinosaurs, is very, very fascinating. I mean, I wouldn't want to be sharing a planet with them because they would probably eat me. Yeah. But so actually, the fact that the extinction of the dinosaurs, from a human point of view, is probably a very good thing, And as a bird watcher, the theory is that the dinosaurs gave us the birds, and I like birds, and so in that sense, I'm quite fond of their place in history, and but I'm rather glad that they are in history. I'm not quite sure that a Richard Attenborough lookalike should start messing around with things that they find in amber and making new ones.
Yeah, or I mean, they're not dinosaurs, but those eggs in Alien, that's another lesson. You don't want to go mucking around with eggs that you found in caves.
Again, I think most of the things we need to know in life we could learn from the movies, but a lot of people think, even now, we're talking about, we're in an era where politicians don't seem to be able to think beyond their immediate needs, or at least they didn't do until recently. I mean, we luckily have a fresh broom in that department. I mean, hopefully things will be better, but things are politically, things are messy at the moment. And the thing is that human beings seem very, very bad at learning or appreciating that if a thing happens here, it can happen again, or that patterns will repeat themselves. And we look at all sorts of things from history, and we somehow think we've got the arrogance to think that we're better than that, and therefore we won't make the same mistakes. But then the same mistakes keep happening.
I don't know why they don't understand that, because that's one of the few things I remember being taught that stuck with me from history lessons. That and sort of not looking at a source but also taking in what the bias is in what you're reading. If that's what I learned from history, that those are two good lessons. But
we do seem to become very single-minded people. If you don't agree with somebody, you're wrong. There's no debate on that score. And I mean, granted, I never did try to have a debate with the Tyrannosaurus Rex, but I mean, so I said the Tyrannosaurus Rex may not look like we think it does. They might be quite cute. They may well be purple. It's hard to say. It's unlikely, but they may well be. And I just think that there are people at the moment who do feel, that they are they're right, full stop. And I don't know, it makes me feel uncomfortable.
If dinosaurs don't look quite like we imagine them, I hope they look more like the good ones in Invasion of the Dinosaurs, not the bad ones in Invasion of the Dinosaurs.
I don't imagine anything natural in the natural order of things would resemble a glove puppet, to be fair.
Yeah, but there's that one dinosaur in Invasion of the Dinosaurs that looks really good. So I hope they all look like him.
We have another subject. Are you a good plant daddy? Do you look after plants well, or do you kill them?
We are gardeners. We do have a garden. It's very overgrown at the moment because we're also fair weather gardeners. So if it's chucking it down for weeks on end, as it has been in this wonderful British summer we've been having, we neglect the garden, something chronic. So the garden is very overgrown, and actually we tend more to my partner's parents' garden because they're more insistent in the sense that it needs doing. So can you come and do it? Whereas our own can be a bit chaotic. So what I find is the stuff that we don't plant seems to thrive and overgrow. I mean, we seem to be very good at brambles. We seem to be extraordinarily good at growing brambles and nettles. Although if we planted brambles and nettles, I suspect they wouldn't grow. It's an odd thing. We buy a lot of plants and sometimes we don't get around to planting them. We do try and grow vegetables. We have. I mean, again, this is more done by my partner than me, to be fair. But we attempt tomatoes and potatoes and stuff like that. I'm fond of the idea of gardening, and actually if I didn't feel quite so focused on my other projects at the moment, I should be outdoors more and I should be gardening more. But again, it's been so soggy and wet that I've just been finding things to do indoors, reading, writing, drawing, whatever, and I don't seem to have been tending the garden as much as I should, and that's bad of me.
What about young Martin? Did he ever have a cactus or?
Well, no,
like a solitary
my mum and dad. When I was up until the age of 14, we lived in a house that had quite a long garden, quite a large, relatively speaking, quite a large garden, certainly compared to where I live now. And it was, I suspect maybe it felt like a larger garden. It was a semi-detached house in a street, so it probably wasn't that huge a garden, but it felt like a large garden when possibly I was about half the height I am now. Maybe that's why. But I had a patch that I could grow things in. So my dad said, that's your flower bed. You can plant whatever you like. And for a short number of years, I was less eager or keen on it than perhaps I ought to have been. But this patch, it's funny. I remember very much I would plant seeds and they would grow, and so I was so there are certain flower types that always take me back to that, like lobelia and antirrhinums. I seem to grow quite a lot of them, which were the two that stick out as things that I planted and they grew again. But I don't necessarily think that was about the enjoyment of gardening as such. But what I think that is it was a strange and peculiar life lesson in how things work. My dad was basically saying, you do this, you add the water, you look after them, and you get these, and you get the flowers. And I think that's the interesting thing about practical life lessons that perhaps we've sort of forgotten now, that we've sort of moved into an era where my sink gets blocked. I go and Google and I see a video, and but people can be quite, I'm not saying ignorant, that's not the word, but people are unaware of you hear it, they're unaware of making the connection between their hamburger, say, and that cow. They don't understand that the meat and that animal that's walking around in that field are in any way related. It's like, people look at vegetables sometimes and they don't seem to make the connection between things you grow and that's food. So actually the lesson in life, if you like, of sticking a few seeds in the ground and getting tomato plants, or sticking a few seeds in the ground and getting potatoes or carrots or whatever, doesn't seem to have been quite so popular. Schools had them, didn't they? Schools had when I was very young, but I remember our school had a little garden next to the playground, that they used to plant vegetables in. And we actually, again, the school I went to as a junior school I went to, I drove along the road it was on a few weeks ago, in fact, and I remember it was surrounded by farmland, and there was quite a lot of farmland around there, and it's all been built on now. So that connection with the earth, with the fact that you grow things to eat things, has sort of been lost, I think.
I think my dad used to go to auctions sometimes as well. Sometimes you'd buy a job lot
of things, and sometimes there'd be a pot plant or two stuck in there. I definitely had spider plants as well. I'm thinking about it now. I don't think I have a spider plant at the moment, and that feels like a bad thing. If I feel like I need to get a spider plant because they're very simple and they don't. They sometimes get exciting and have those stalks come out of them with other little baby spider plants on.
At this time of year, we are very tempted by the supermarkets. All seem to have displays of plants for sale, and we do tend to pick up probably far more than we ought to, really. But they do get planted on the whole. The interesting thing about house plants is we've not had them for many years, and this last year we've started having house plants again. Funnily enough, we've separated. Well, I say we. I mean, I haven't done any of this, but we've managed to separate a cheese plant to grow other cheese plants, and now we have more cheese plants than you could possibly know what to do with. People don't seem to like cheese plants anymore in the same way. I mean, they used to be a bit of a staple in the average sort of household. You know, they had a cheese plant in the corner. If you watch the amount of old television as I do, you'll see, you know, it's in the 70s especially, there's cheese plants seem to be everywhere, and they seem to have become kind of unfashionable now. But now, of course, because we've sort of, I can't remember what the word is, but we've split them to grow new. I can't remember. I cultivated them, I suppose. And now we have like about half a dozen cheese plants, and we're trying to work out whether or not we can give them away. And will people go, oh, no, not a cheese plant?
I have one, but we live too far apart.
Oh, there we go. Well, we're old-fashioned kinds of
people. You can email at me. We do need to invent teleportation. It would be much easier. Why can't we transfer a cheese plant?
Indeed. It'd be always handy if someone could just sort of, you know, it's always interesting when you're talking to somebody down the line and they're eating and you're thinking, oh, what are they eating? And they say, oh, I'm eating a sandwich. And you think, well, quite fancy a sandwich now. But of course, you're in the middle of recording, so you can't go off and make a sandwich. And you think, now what they should do is there should be some way of beaming a sandwich to it.
Yeah, absolutely. It would make perfect sense. We also went for a phase of having orchids because, but they can get a bit excitable and end up have them, and then you sort of find that they'd perhaps stained the wall because you didn't realise they'd got all excited at some point and had dribbled down the wall.
I've never done the orchid, to be fair, and they always looked like hard work to me. And of course, the films I grew up watching, they always had specialist orchid rooms that were glass houses that had to be kept very, very hot and things like that. But I think that the average temperature needed for an orchid to survive seems to have reduced over the last few decades.
Yeah, they live quite fine in my flat. Maybe I shall get another one day. But my flatmate's very brutal with plants. Like, whereas I would probably let, you know, if you've got a cacti and it's not looking too good, I'd probably try and nurture it back to health. But I suddenly go into the kitchen and realise, oh, where's that cactus gone? And he's like, oh, I'll chuck that one out. I'm like, what? Well, Cindy, you've thrown Cindy away.
I know there are people who love cactuses or cacti. I'm not really been, again, we've had a couple, but I don't think we've ever been particularly successful with them. But I know we have people we're related to who were big fans of the cacti. But it's an odd one, really, because I'm quite a fan of the lily as well. The lily as a flower. I like the flower, but again, when I buy cut flowers in the supermarket, you know, the thing about lilies is when they open, you've got to get that. I mean, you were saying about the stains from the orchids. Yeah. You've got to cut those bits out, otherwise they will stain everything. Wonderful, beautiful flower, the lily, but you need to be there with your scissors.
The pollen's poisonous for cats, supposedly. But I mean, I even tried things like Venus flytraps and lithops, the little succulent things that are like living stones. But again, so some succulents you can almost they'll exist and you don't have to do too much to them. But it's very easy to overwater some succulents. And,
I like the idea. We had Venus flytraps at school. I was always very taken with them. I don't know. There's something rather special about them, I think. But I don't know whether I could successfully cultivate them or have them in the house. But I suspect with the amount of insects we have in the house, it might not be the worst thing, actually.
If you get a bad review on your podcast, you just lure the reviewer to your house and then push them into the Venus flytrap. But
Oh, Paul, how little you understand how few people listen to the stuff. The fact if someone would even take the time to review it would be a bonus, I'll tell you.
I have to get a Venus flytrap more like the one in Little Shop of Horrors rather than the ones that I had. I don't think anyone's going to be falling into the ones I had. They were very small. But
anyway, I think that's enough grumbling for this time. We'll reconvene for further grumblings another episode.
I always find them rather cheery. It's nice to speak to you again, Paul. Take care.
It's good. I always think that things that are stuck in your brain, if you can get them out of your brain, that you're sharing them and they become less of a... They're not sort of festering away quite so much. But,
well, until you mentioned them, I hadn't really thought about them.
Yeah, you see, this is therapy. This is therapy.
Indeed.
I'll send my bill. Okie dokie.
You might be grumbling at the late payment.
Yeah, we'll do that next time. Thank you very much.
Well, listeners, that's about all we've got time for. I thought I'd interject here and wish you well and thank you for listening. And, but never fear, because we'll be back again soon. So you take care, and we'll try not to grumble quite as much next time you hear us. But, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. All right. Bye-bye for now. Bye-bye. Goodbye. Yeah, goodbye.
Wow, really? No kidding.
Thank you, darling. And you too. Bye-bye.
Oh, that sounded good.
This show is part of the Pride 48 network. Find more shows over at pride48.com.
Oh dear, what's going on now? Oh, it's the Shy Life podcast.
Let's go.
I have a voice. I have a voice.
You have a voice.
You have a voice.
We have a voice.
We have a voice.
Unique voices in podcasting.
UnivazPods.net.
That is so cringe, oh my god. You're a man of culture as well.
Have you time for one more 20 minutes?
Oh, I think so. Have you actually got something from the book you might want to... So that just went into a total rant, didn't it? I'm sorry.
I think, yeah, but I'm looking through the... I don't like any of these on these pages.
Oh, okay.
We can talk about reading in the bath if you want, but only if you ever did read in the bath. There's turbulence on airplanes. No, we've done enough airplanes today. There's one about fat people on airplanes. I'm thinking fat people aren't the...
We're not going to do fat shame.
Occasionally, occasionally that can be a problem, but I'm usually one of those people. So, but it's the people who are putting their chairs back who are the real danger, or the people who haven't bothered to book their ticket together, and they kind of expect you to, oh, do you mind swapping? And you've particularly booked a seat because for whatever reason, maybe accessible reasons, you wanted to be on the aisle, and you're like, no, I'm happy where I am, thank you.
See, there's not another rant on aeroplanes coming, even as we speak.
I know.
This is just the weirdest thing I've ever heard. Well, gotta tell you, I didn't expect that.
What the hell just happened on this show? I mean, seriously, reverse it, because I lost. What's going on? What happened?
Man, was that worth it or not? Oh my goodness, that was a darling little shoe. Whoa, I love that one. Great show, Paul. Yeah, that was a good shoe. 760. That was beautifully done.
You can always call me.
Oh, everyone's a critic.
Oi, oi, that's your lot.
Et voilà.
Talk to you soon. Bye.
Okay, stopping recording now.